Good morning, everyone. I'm ThinkLA Executive Director Don Lupo. Welcome to Big Ticket Purchasing, Full Speed Ahead for Automotive, presented by Ogury. We're so glad you could join us this morning. Before we get started, a few reminders. Please visit thinkla.org to register for our weekly newsletter and to stay in touch with our community. The ThinkLA podcast is now available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Big thanks to Ogury for sponsoring this webinar and adding to our lineup of great, relevant content for our community. And now, please welcome Simon Curtis, VP, Programmatic Revenue and Agency Partnerships at Ogury.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm thrilled to be part of this ThinkLA event. My name is Simon Curtis, and I'm the Vice President of Programmatic Revenue and Agency Partnerships at Ogury. Today, I'm going to be discussing recent mobile behavior trends within the automotive category. But before I jump into the content, I want to give a quick overview of who Ogury is for those who may be unfamiliar. Ogury is the personified advertising company, creating a breakthrough advertising engine that delivers precision, sustainability, and privacy protection within one technology stack, built and optimized for mobile. Of course, I'm happy to share more about Ogury at a later time for anyone that is interested. So please do let me know, or actually anyone from our amazing Los Angeles team, who, by the way, I got to see in person yesterday for the first time in many, many months. That's progress. But without further ado, let's get into our short presentation. Today, I'm going to kick it off by discussing the shift in consumer spending and media consumption. I'll then share some specific persona-based trends. Following the presentation, there will be a very exciting panel with Nicola Perrigo, VP of Digital Media at RPA, and Raul Rios, SVP of Strategy at Walton Isaacson. I'm super excited for this, so let's jump right in. All right, let's kick it off by discussing how consumer spend has shifted recently and how media consumption has also shifted. The automotive category was among one of the hardest hit industries during the start of the pandemic. In 2020, many car dealerships closed and car buying ground to a halt, with sales plummeting 47% in the US in April alone. This was a staggering 30-year low. Toward the later half of the year, sales swiftly rebounded to an extent that many didn't expect. Thankfully, across the second half of the year, we saw a steady rebound in consumer spend, with many major automotive companies reporting positive year-end figures. But despite end-of-year quarterly gains, annual US auto sales overall still declined by 15% in 2020. All in all, despite overall automotive sales declining last year, the relatively strong finish from a number of auto companies gave auto marketers renewed confidence. Okay, so here's the good news. With the new year bringing in a new sense of stability, consumer confidence increased in Q1. This increased consumer confidence has resulted in new sales, which will continue across the year. In fact, new vehicle sales are forecast to increase by up to 10% in 2021. And used car sales are predicted to double that of new car sales. With increased consumer spend comes increased ad spend. Digital ad spending in the auto category in the US is expected to reach $13.29 billion, which is a year-over-year increase of 21.4%. With consumer spend and ad spend rising, it's important for advertisers to know which devices auto buyers leverage during their car buying process. According to a study by Car Gurus, 61% of car buyers are now open to buying online, which is almost twice as many as before the pandemic. Not only are in-market auto intenders turning to digital showrooms, they're specifically turning to their mobile devices. Research conducted by Ipsos Media revealed that 71% of auto shoppers use mobile at some point during the purchase process. With auto shoppers turning to their mobile devices, marketers need to understand the nuanced behaviors between the varying auto shoppers and how these behaviors evolve over time. All right, so with that, we know there's a massive opportunity for auto marketers to better understand the 2021 auto shopper. In this next section, I will share some automotive-related persona-based insights to provide a deeper understanding of how behaviors have evolved over time. But before I do that, I'll give you an overview of Ogury Active Insights in our custom persona study. Ogury Active Insights is a data modeling and visualization solution which brings to life Ogury's unique, reliable personification data. This tool provides visual, actionable insights on audience interest, behavior, and dynamics to inform and optimize advertising strategies. Ogury's custom persona is a study within Active Insights that uncovers the demographic breakdown of specific audiences, plus interest in discriminate behaviors. And that's what I'll be sharing with you. Okay, so here we go. With buyers extremely interested in used car shopping in 2020, let's get to know the used car shopper a little better. Based on an advanced custom persona study within Ogury Active Insights, here you can better understand the used car shopper persona. These shoppers skew more male, with 65% of this audience being male, and 69% of this audience is between the age of 25 and 44 years old. It's no surprise that a lot of these users own the used car shopping app AutoTrader. Interestingly, they're not only in market for cars, but they're also interested in new mobility vehicles and ride shares. With these users 2.6 times more likely to own the Bird app, and 28% of these users own the Uber app as well. Now, looking outside of the automotive category, we learned that this audience is also interested in real estate, with 18% of these users owning the Zillow app. We also know that these users are job hunting, with 16% of them owning the Indeed job search app. And we know that they value deals, with 12% of the group owning the Groupon app. So we've discovered this persona group is cost conscious and is going through some life changes, including moving to a new house and potentially starting a new job. It's important to also understand how their behaviors change quarter over quarter. Here you can see some shifts in the demographics and interest of used car shoppers personas from Q4 2020 to Q1 2021. There has been a 3% increase in female users, a 5% increase in ownership of the Cash app, an 8% increase in ownership of the AutoZone app, and a 3% decrease in ownership of the Tinder app. This reveals that users are increasingly more interested in car buying and are using their mobile devices more to manage their finances. Now, when breaking down the insights by demographic, we also learned the female used car shopper persona became more interested in furniture stores in Q1 2021 compared to the previous quarter. There was an 8% increase in ownership of the IKEA app, which indicates that these users are decorating or maybe furnishing a home in addition to buying a car. So what can brands do with this information? Here's an example of how brands can target 3 various sub-personas within the broader used car persona. I've chosen to showcase the cost-conscious used car shopper, the new home used car shopper, and lastly, the job hunter used car shopper. It starts by combining demographic inputs with a custom app and site targeting matrix, in addition to relevant keywords, such as what you see here. As you get to know the interests and discriminants of the personas, you can leverage data-informed inputs in your targeting setup and be more relevant with your brand messaging. Because you know the interests and behaviors of the personas, you can get specific with your targeting setup and your brand messaging to ensure that your messages truly resonate. And as you can imagine, there are, of course, various other personas that we have analyzed and could dig into further. But I'm excited to get into the conversation with our esteemed panelists. However, if you would like to better understand any of these personas or any additional personas, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can share this information over as a follow-up. My email is simon.curtis@ogury.com. But before concluding this short presentation, I wanted to summarize a few key takeaways for our audience. Firstly, consumer spend and ad spend will increase this year, so marketers should have a thorough understanding of their evolving interests and behaviors. Secondly, consumers have moved their shopping habits online. The move from offline to online has been steadily shifting for years. But now industries that were slightly lagging, like the auto industry, are digital first. And finally, brands should implement strategic activations based on the nuanced behaviors of their key audiences, which we'll chat about more soon. And finally, I'll now unshare my screen and welcome our panelists to turn on their cameras. All right, everyone's here? Thanks a lot for joining us today. Why don't we kick this chat off by introducing yourself and your role? In addition, if you don't mind humoring me for a second, and in order to break the ice, figuratively and virtually that is, would you mind sharing what's been keeping you busy outside of work during the lockdown? Any new hobbies, interests, road trips, maybe some Netflix recommendations? I'll kick this one off. I started playing golf last summer, really to get out of the house and take a break from being on the computer all day. It took me a while, but I finally relinquished my stubbornness and I'm getting lessons now after realizing that I just simply cannot teach myself this sport. It's a great sport. It's super challenging. And of course, we're super lucky to live here in Southern California with all the great golfing options nearby. You simply gotta love Los Angeles. Nicola, would you mind going first and then followed by Raul?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicola Perrigo. I'm Vice President of Digital Media at RPA. Unfortunately, during lockdown, all of my hobbies prior had been related to the home. Like I enjoy cooking, so I needed to find ways to just get out. So I made, morning beach walks a thing. And then, I think as most people did, and you've seen research around it, like happy hour maybe started a little earlier. So I would say maybe like I became a mixologist during quarantine. We could go there.
I have heard that drinking consumption did increase significantly during these days. How about you, Raul?
Hi there, everyone. I'm Raul Rios, SVP of Strategy at Walton Isaacson. And let's see, now that a lot of my friends are kind of moving into the world of being vaccinated, we are, there's sort of a lineup of hikes and brunches and dinners at friends' places. And so, just kind of trying to get back into, the rhythm of that. I'm finding, there are moments where I'm loving it, but I'm like, I kind of like the little bit of the slower pace that lockdown, brought for us. But, it's been great. It's been great to see people and, just the simplicity of just, hugging someone and being able to like share a meal with them. Those are things that I totally took for granted. And it's just the simplicity of it all that I'm really relishing right now.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely been some pros that have come out of these days, and it's made us and forced us to not take certain things for granted, for sure. So I appreciate those introductions and for sharing your icebreaker with us. Let's jump straight into discussing some of the challenges that you've encountered over this crazy past year. We know that spending habits have changed since the start of the pandemic, particularly with regard to the significant decrease in discretionary spending. What are some of the main challenges that you have encountered, and how did you overcome some of these challenges? Who wants to go first? Chivalry, should we go with that? Nicola, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think you covered, a number of the challenges in your presentation earlier, right? You talked, fleets were hammered by the travel restrictions, and that impacted the used car market pretty heavily. But I think, and as you indicated in your research, the auto market has bounced back just fine. Folks who aren't ready to go back to public transport, are making auto purchases for that freedom. A number of friends in New York are buying their first cars.
Right.
So, I think, for us, it's just a matter of understanding we can only control, what we can. And so I think one of the main challenges was just kind of seeing what the tides were going to bring and making sure that we were being nimble and agile, especially with our marketing, which I know we'll get into in a little bit, as those changes rolled out.
Yeah, no, I would say on our end, when the pandemic started, it was really about just kind of putting a message out there and understanding, like, okay, what really is, sort of the needs of the consumers, and safety was a big issue, and so we wanted to make sure that we're putting kind of the messaging out there that, what is it like if you wanted to go to a dealer? What sort of protocols are in place? Or, if you don't, what are your options? So I think just thinking through more kind of the realities that people were living in, even as we approached the holidays and, kind of some of the work that we did and thinking about, the way people were living, we wanted to reflect that, most people are probably going to drive by each other's homes and kind of wave from the car, just kind of do something in the driveway. And so I think that level of realism and acknowledging just where we were, but still remaining optimistic, was really key. And like the data showed, there was that big dip, but then there was a surge back, and part of it was a lot of people, their leases were up. There was like unprecedented time where leases were up, and so people were kind of holding off. But there was also a sense, if you wanted to, get out of your house, what was your kind of safest option? It was in your car. And so, the vehicle started to really represent an extension of your lifestyle, and sort of, it gave you a level of freedom. And I think vehicles have always given us a sense of freedom, but so much more so in the environment we were living in. We could actually go out, kind of escape the world we were in, even for like an hour or two. And that meant a lot to consumers.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And admittingly, we did more road trips than we've ever done before. So yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying. That's
Yeah,
very
I think,
interesting.
on our end too, in terms of like how we sought to overcome some of these challenges, we worked with our clients, to prioritize a lot of their marketing around where we saw demand, like you said, more of that SUV trunk emphasis, where extended terms were driving up demand, people that were more likely to remain employed, were becoming increasingly desirous of those outdoor activities, right?
Right.
So working with our clients to kind of prioritize, where we were going to focus our auto marketing. And then, obviously when the stimulus hit, income workers went back to work, low income workers went back to work, and entry vehicles started to move again. We saw that increase in offer messaging, right? As we were part of a recession. So, we're trying to do what we could to entice people. And then, like you said, I think, and Raul, you put it beautifully, optimism, right? All the research is showing us that the pandemic recovery will lead to higher spending, not just this year, but next year as well. And really unleashing that pent up demand, as you nodded to, with younger car buyers. So I think, we're all very hopeful for what the future, is going to bring us.
Absolutely. I love the optimism. Now, if I may, I'd like to chat about media for a moment. Consumers today are spending way more time on their mobile devices than ever before. That's pretty obvious, and I'm surely guilty as charged on that point too. But that said, as marketers, have you changed where you invest your media budgets to keep up with the evolution of your consumers' media consumption?
Sure, I'll go ahead and jump in here. I think the pandemic sort of just accelerated what we were already seeing. People were gravitating much more so to, digital mobile devices. And even when we, were kind of thinking from a creative standpoint, we always guide our creatives to think about, the content they're making needs to live effectively on a phone. And so that is going to be, kind of the future of how we engage. We work a lot with diverse audiences, multicultural consumers, over-index significantly on mobile devices. And so when we think about, particularly in the auto category, kind of the dynamic movement of video really is one of the best ways to showcase the product. And so those are kind of the variables that we think about, as we're, developing the content, the user experience in particular. How many times have we tried to open something on our phone? It's a total disaster, but it's kind of okay on other devices. So those are just kind of these nuances that we are now really spending a lot of time, integrating, particularly within the agency, to make sure that, our creative minds and our, kind of media-led kind of perspectives in our media team are really working together. Even though at a strategic level, we kind of know where the consumer sits, but now it's much more on an execution focus. That is really, I think, what the pandemic kind of taught us. I don't think we're all going to suddenly close our laptops and just be like, we're done for the day. There will be, kind of this hybrid experience on how we engage, how we work. There's some things that we aren't going to go back to. We're like, I'm totally fine to have my groceries delivered now. Like, it's great. And other people love it. They want to go back and, kind of have that sensory experience. But I think it's the options, giving our audiences, the ability to personalize. That is going to be a big thing, as we kind of look forward.
Yeah, I agree with Raul. I don't think this is necessarily a COVID conversation. Smart marketers are always looking at consumption, what our audiences are doing, how they're changing, how they're evolving, and I do think gone are the days of us planning from a media perspective and not looking at it for another year, right? We are constantly planning based on data, replanning, adjusting, pivoting, replanning. Like, I think, it's creating extra work, but it's necessary work, right? Because we have to be ready for the next thing. And we have to be watching what our audiences are doing and what their needs are. I think smart marketers are going to take lessons away from what they saw about how to serve their customers better and learn better about what their customers need and most importantly, value going forward. So, it's not just a media conversation, but as Raul put it, it's a messaging conversation as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, related to this, we're also curious, how big of a role does this video play in your overall strategy, and in particular, mobile video?
Yeah, I can go first. I mean, I think, again, it's, we're always looking at where our audiences are, what type of media they're consuming, and tailor our, channel and messaging strategy accordingly. Video continues to be a great way to hit automotive shoppers, right? It's about using sight, sound, and motion as a way to convey that, poignant auto messaging, whatever it might be. I think in terms of how we're using video, we can use, streaming is obviously increasing significantly.
Right.
I think the key with video, right, is to ensure you have the right messaging and you're laddering up to whatever that larger business objective is. We're seeing live TV still obviously driving video viewing. And, we're just staying on top of the number of shifts in the industry with all the AT&T Discovery news that's recently come out. So I think, again, we're pivoting our marketing to, where the customer is. So I think, video always, almost always has a place in what we do. And for mobile, mobile has to be part of our strategy, right? I think, I would say that, during COVID, we all learned to use our phones in a million different ways, right? Accomplishing necessary, like Raul put it, grocery shopping, whatever, useful and fun tasks to, grocery shopping and dancing on TikTok. And I don't think those habits are going to go away anytime soon. So, it's just a matter of being where our customer is and tailoring our message accordingly.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think when we look at TV and mobile, it is a big part of our approach. It's a big part of our budgets. I'll even give an example, from like a Black consumer perspective, they view, the phone as an extension of themselves. So, from I'm able to engage with people who, I care about to that's how I pay for everything. Think about using, Apple Pay, for example, as a way to, kind of, if you don't want to, let's say, engage physically with, the touch screen, you can kind of use that. And so it creates that convenience. So I think, as we sort of were looking, as the consumers have been evolving in the current situation, as mentioned, streaming is huge. We were seeing that, now there's this, wide array of options. And a lot of it is, in a way personalized. Again, you think about what's been going on in culture, and we can see, how many streaming channels now offer, content that's specifically related to either the Black consumer, the Hispanic consumer, the LGBTQ consumer, even the Asian consumer. So all of this is just going to continue to grow. And so our ability to understand, like, what is the affinity with our specific audiences around content, while again, it's a little bit more work, so to speak, but it does allow for that kind of hyper targeting. Consumers are becoming much more sophisticated and wanting to craft their own narrative, to see their own narrative reflected. And so as marketers, we have to kind of keep that in mind, that the work that we make has to be flexible. There may be times where, we're going to maybe want to customize it even more so. So that's something we go into in the beginning of the process, knowing that, hey, there might be different areas that we're going to put it in that didn't even exist a year ago.
Right.
Maybe even tomorrow, there are going to be even more out in the marketplace. So I think that variety of content is creating, again, just more opportunities to reach, sub-segments of the audiences that we really didn't have the option for before.
Yeah, this is a great segue. We were also really curious about your targeting practices for your audiences. And I think you mentioned a bit of it, Raul. But what have you learned about your average demographic as more time is spent online and on mobile? And how are you reaching these consumers effectively?
Well, I would say, as time has gone on, we've really kind of started to understand just the layer of sub-segmenting and the opportunities there. Sort of the traditional model is like, maybe you've got like 3 segments and you're sort of like, we're done for the day. And, that's kind of how you, approach it.
Right.
And now we're able to actually dig quite deep. We're able to see, kind of based on behavior, maybe, as you were kind of mentioning before, maybe there's certain apps consumers might have, maybe there's certain content that they're watching. We can, in a way, develop like proxies and triangulate much more nuances, different nuances around who these consumers are. So we're creating and kind of helping our clients, understand the segmenting game. It's something that, the cadence in which we're looking at this data has really increased. Before we could maybe do it, maybe like on a quarterly basis, but now we're really picking up the pace just because of the level of change, how rapid things move in a digital environment. So we have to actually spend more time looking at, all right, where are the consumers sitting today? What are they gravitating to? Something might happen in culture and suddenly, there's a migration to sort of this new form of content. All of that is just yielding more data on how to understand the consumer mindset. So we are leaning much more so into, kind of ad tech in that regard.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think, on our team, our marketing intelligence group lives and breathes audiences, right? And we're constantly turning out new insights. I think, we've pivoted to more of that kind of living in a test and learn environment, pivoting segmentation based on, brainstorms we've done with our clients and their data teams, testing out various data providers. I think that that's just the new norm, as Raul put it. I think during COVID particularly, we couldn't ignore the fact, right, that folks were leaning on their larger screens a little more, right? Everyone was home, and why not? But we're also spazzes by nature, and still had our phones open and still had our tablets open, and continued to love doing that while we were, watching that bigger screen content. So, social, for example, is a great example, right? COVID accelerated that media growth, and boosted a lot of those emerging platforms, right? Adults are spending 7 more minutes a day than they were in 2019 on social media. TikTok's average users, right, increased like 150%. Average time on Snapchat rose more than 20% at the onset of the pandemic. So I think those are the types of insights that we have to pay attention to as marketers and really pivot our strategies accordingly.
Yeah, makes sense. I think I'm being asked to, we're going to submit a poll right now. We're going to poll the audience. I would yield to the support team on that. Did you purchase a car, or have you considered purchasing a car in the past year? And it's saying host and panelists can't vote, so I'm being left out of this. So did we get the results? And here we go. Wow, even split between yes and no. That's pretty interesting. All right, I think we'll probably do another one a bit later, but in the meantime, we know that people are now shopping in person less, obviously, and are turning to e-commerce instead. How big a role does the digital showroom play in your auto strategy? I've seen a few examples of an auto digital showroom recently. It's pretty impressive how this technology has advanced since the last time I bought a car. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can hop in here. I mean, I think, from our perspective, the research we're seeing is, while that trend has certainly increased, for such a big purchase, folks truly want that kind of omni-channel experience. So
Right.
There's only, from the data we've seen, there's only a few people that want literally only an e-tail experience. So while we think it'll be a factor, it may not be the end all be all. So we can't ignore, the brick and mortars and what's happening on the ground. And measuring things like store visitation and things like that, I think will still be important moving forward. It'll just move to more of a kind of blend of indicators, right?
Right.
And it'll be kind of a balanced approach. But from my perspective, I don't see us moving completely digital showroom tomorrow anytime soon.
Right. It's maybe here to stay partially, but not fully or exclusively, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, auto in general is one of the big pioneers in sort of looking at a product in this way. Now, other categories, kind of done that. I think cosmetics is a good example. But, the ability to kind of see the features inside and out, 360 view, you can customize it. That is something that this industry has really pioneered. When we think of the consumers, and again, I'm kind of thinking through the lens of, sort of the next generation of consumers. So they're younger, they're under 40, they're diverse. They utilize this technology again to create that custom approach on how they want to engage with the product. But it still will, they also like the sensory experience. So, that doesn't mean they're going to abandon eventually going to the dealership. But I think about the dealership is not just sort of, one point in the journey. The dealership is, as we've been discussing, sort of this kind of fluid experience. So,
right.
There is now a digital dealership storefront that I need to be aware of. And, I think about, there still will be some consumers who, maybe they will go view it in person, but when they want to actually make the purchase, they may want the convenience of having it delivered to their home. And so that, I think, will create sort of a dynamic, for the auto industry to kind of think through, like, all right, the customer service aspect now actually has to be like an on-site experience. And what does that look like? When you have the representative come and sort of engage with the consumer and drop off the vehicle, and there will be a lot of expectations around that. It's just an extension of the brand, all of these different touch points. So we're thinking through a lot of that, knowing that, as we explore, consumers who, maybe still hesitant over the next year to go back in person and engage in that way, what their options are. And yeah, digital showrooms do, offer a lot of flexibility. I mean, just really quick, you think about, and granted, this model didn't sort of, model of purchasing get sort of a lot of traction, but it is interesting to think about in the subscription model. So like Volvo, for example, had this in the last year. I think they kind of are like deciding whether they want to still do it. But you could just, lease a vehicle on your phone, literally. You would just,
Mhm.
in a few minutes, you swipe with Apple Pay and it's going to be delivered. So I think that convenience level will still be there. But yeah, I think consumers still will want to like touch, feel, smell, like all of those sensory things, are incredibly important in a time when, in a way, we were deprived of that, so, we're going to lean into that moving forward for sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Raul, and makes a lot of sense. Um, so historically, Auto has measured the success of their digital advertising with driving to a dealer type performance metrics. And I know, Nicola, you've talked a little bit about this, but I'm curious to learn how you've been shifting away from the foot driving KPIs, or perhaps as of late, is that somewhat coming back now that vaccinations are increasing and confidence is increasing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to your point, I kind of touched on it a little bit already, but I feel like it's going to continue to be a blend, right? We're looking at, key purchase indicators online, we're looking at, store visits, we're looking at all of that in conjunction with one another. Ultimately, we need sales. So we're also looking at that as a factor as well. Just because a media KPI spiked and sales didn't, like that's a real conversation we have to have. So it continues to be a blend. And I think it's going to evolve even more as we move into kind of the privacy world that we're all entering right now. Measuring and tweaking how we measure is going to be really, really important, because changes are here and they're coming. So working with analytics teams to make sure that you're set up for success on the measurement end, as not just consumer behavior changes, but the industry changes, I think is going to be critically important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, thanks for that.
we look
Yeah,
at it
Raul, please.
in the same way. I think, we have this conversation with clients all the time. Like, does sort of one ad campaign lead to, a whole lot of sales? And the quick answer is no. I mean, there are so many, different variables that lead to a purchase. But we can, so in that regard, I think it's important to, have that conversation with the client on, well, what are those variables that we're going to kind of use to help us kind of determine what, our level of success. And, we do look at, the kind of the standard KPIs, of course, from a media metric standpoint. But then there's also, the sentiment, how is the brand being perceived? We do a lot of measurements on brand health, and, some of those become much more intangible in a way. And, it's looking at it in a holistic fashion. Again, it's not like an A to B equation that if I do, this one thing, it's going to now lead to this huge spike in sales. So I think looking at it again in that diverse kind of almost a portfolio model of how you approach your investment in from a media standpoint, those are the ways that we are guiding clients. So these are like levers then that we can kind of dial and adjust to. Because again, as I mentioned before, it's so much more a finessing with our consumers. Their level of sophistication, their short attention spans, these are things that, we have to kind of tweak at a very fine-tuned level. And so that's just a different way of looking at it.
Thanks for that. That's very interesting. I do want to pause for a second. At this point, I'd urge the audience to submit a few questions in the chat for our panelists now, so we can get to them in a few moments. Now, as we know, there's been a lot of change in ad tech and the auto sector in the past 14 months. How have you been leaning on your ad tech partners for support?
Yeah, I can hop in here. So, we're always partnering with our platforms for help as we navigate any and all changes, right? Our clients committed to industry leading ad tech eons ago, and we as an agency as well. So I think, as a result, we've built our skill sets more kind of hands-on in the platform. And really what we do with our ad tech partners is really partner with them to ensure their technology is up to snuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it does what we need it to do, that we recommend product changes when it doesn't, stay on top of everything that all the platforms can do. So the one you've chosen is still top of the list. And I think, most importantly, that platforms are gearing up for what the future has in store for us, and are actively working on solutions to combat some of the privacy changes that we're up against. So I think for us it's more of a technology conversation than it is a personnel conversation. That said, we've established great relationships with all of our ad tech partners over the course of the many years. So for us it's truly a product conversation.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, great to hear. And Raul, how about you?
Yeah, for us with our ad tech partners, I mean, we're really leaning, kind of back to the segmenting conversation, to understand, where are the opportunities within the segments. And so, we look a lot at, what is the move up opportunity? How can we conquest better? And, allowing us to kind of, again, is we're actually in a stage where we're kind of looking at the brand and, thinking about the positioning. Do we need to revisit who our consumer is, and sort of, our ad tech partners are helping us, hone in on a lot of the attributes, or even kind of cull them in a different way. That has allowed us to see an opportunity in a way that, we had this kind of massive segment before, and actually there was a subsegment within it, that is the growth opportunity. And so really we didn't quite get to that without our ad tech partners, because we couldn't see where, the over indexing was happening. So, that along with the cadence, I mean, we're spending so much more time looking at this data. And so it's in a way where we're kind of reaching back to our partners saying, we need a greater level of personalization and customization and how we're looking at this information. And so that, I think, is like the growing dialogue. But even a little bit, we're kind of seeing, obviously, in what's happening out in the world with data and privacy, and that's another conversation we're having. Like, what is going to be the approach from our partners to sort of address this, knowing that consumers are gonna, kind of look into that, with brands. Like, are you able to, make that choice on who gets your information and how it's being used?
Very interesting. And have you discovered any new audiences, and throughout the pandemic, perhaps, that have any, new alliance or interest in your brands?
Yeah, I would say from, we think about, and I'm just going to talk in the world of luxury automotive.
Yes, please.
I think, what we're seeing is an even younger and even more diverse consumer than we thought. And actually a household income level that was lower than we thought. So that has been kind of a little bit of, kind of shifting the paradigm. And when I think historically, just kind of how luxury auto sort of speaks to the world, I mean, it is sort of, somewhat, an older consumer, kind of a little bit, a higher level income. And so now we're seeing kind of this new way of thinking. But on the same token, we're also now in a bigger competitive set, because you have non-luxury auto, which in a way is also kind of fighting for those consumers. So it creates a different, in a way, strategic approach on how do we position the brand and help define luxury in a way that is distinct, but still appeals to, in a way, now this new group that, historically we had kind of seen as, well, they'll grow into luxury. And the idea is like, no, now straight out of the gate, they're going to want luxury. So how do we reach them in their early 20s? It's just a different way of thinking of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The continued digitalization of the auto industry will become the new normal. What digital trends do you urge the marketers on this call to watch out for this year? Who wants to go first?
I can hop in. I think in the words of one of my clients, the only constant is change. I think we all have to be prepared for the unexpected right now, plan for that agility and plan for that nimbleness. Folks are going to continue to use multiple platforms, right? Adjusting our targeting is going to be really key. We've talked about the privacy changes that are coming at us, right? A move to contextual targeting and cohorts and addressability and opt-in and all that good stuff. I think none of us believe that cookies were here to stay forever. So I think we're excited to see the landscape evolve and change there, and staying on top of these privacy changes is paramount to us so we can keep our clients and advertising prepared for what's happening now and to come. But overall, I think, just being prepared to pivot, right? Like, and ensure that constant relevance is key. And it's going to be harder now, right? Because, with iOS 14.5, like, that's going to get more and more difficult. And I think we need to, as marketers, stay as relevant as we can, but also, see how we can play a role as an industry in educating the public, that if the pendulum swings too far, there might be that greater impact to them, right? Than just the fear of tracking. It may result in how they consume content freely on the web. So I think, we need to do everything we can, like rigorous data partner evaluations, identity graph testing, data clean rooms, adjusting how we measure. But I think a lot of that's going to be on our partners to help with, us as agencies for that continued education. Folks like Facebook aren't being shy right now. But I think, overall, I think the education aspect is going to be key. And we're just going to have to be ready to pivot and move based on what gets thrown our way.
Yeah, well said. I like that. Raul, do you have a quick comment on that before we get into some of the?
Yeah, just some quick comments. I would say, just kind of to echo the, sort of the privacy concerns. I think we'll be seeing, kind of a lot of maybe new entrants into sort of the ad tech world who are going to kind of create that privacy message as sort of their main platform. Like, they're able to kind of provide brands with almost the ability to kind of have a PR moment where they're able to say, the data that we collect, is, the consumer knows and is very transparent about that. So now that becomes kind of a totally different conversation on the way we look at data. It almost has like a social statement to it. I'd say the other thing is, the trend of trying to understand, how we leverage, this sort of world of streaming and the proliferation of that, knowing that it will still be important, but then, live events are really going to be, kind of a different animal. So, whether it's a sporting event or like an awards event, things where there will be a topical conversation in real time, those will represent different opportunities than sort of, kind of a static streaming experience. And then I would say kind of lastly, thinking about just again, that as culture changes, the affinity of our consumers will also evolve. Today there's, racial justice is a huge topic of conversation, and I think it will continue to be. But there will be other emerging dialogues, and so as that happens, our consumers will start gravitating again to what matters to them. And so as a marketer, just kind of staying focused on that and having our ad tech partners, guide us, to those opportunities and allow us to capture that data, I think will continue to be important.
Yeah, that's great. So I know we're getting close to short on time here. So I do want to start entertaining some of the audience questions. And the first one is, the sales funnel for auto is a longer one in that it is a big ticket purchase. With your campaigns, how do you show return on investment?
Wow, that's a good question. Okay, so we do it in a couple ways. So, obviously, we've got like sales, right? But then, as I was saying, it's not a one and done. It's not like a linear line from campaign to sales. So the other thing that we do is we do actually a lot of research with, one of our partners, Kantar, who will help us understand, all right, as a campaign is in flight, how does consumer perception change during, those periods? And they're able to look at it for us, like multiple campaigns, even comparing to, we work with other agencies who represent other segments, and we're able to see that. And so that also helps us in kind of demonstrating ROI, because while we like obviously more sales, there also is a sense of we want to increase, affinity for the brand, loyalty for the brand. There are all these sort of brand health metrics that we want to improve. And so we can do that through sort of this kind of aggregation of the media data. And so a lot of that is very helpful in demonstrating the ROI, because especially as we look at it over time, you can see really interesting stories. And it also makes the case for, when we're not making the media investment, what happens? And we see those, the lines start dipping and our competitors start rising above us. And so that's another good way to tell the ROI story, at least for the way we're leveraging it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How about you, Nicola?
Yeah, ROI with big ticket purchases is obviously important, but looking, I think, at the role of how your media is working together is really important, right? That last touch point is hard. So looking at the role each impression is playing, plays a critical role to understand what is ultimately driving the needle. So I think, especially a big ticket purchase, you have that time to really do some of that analysis and that measurement, which we think is, ultimately very critical with something like an automotive purchase.
Great. So I'm going to move quickly to our last question from Kyle Tran. Do clients find video advertising, pre-roll, et cetera, valuable, or are they more interested in traditional display ads?
I can go first. I mean, I don't think it's a matter of interest, to be honest, right? I think, unless the client is interested in a certain piece of creative and feels compelled enough, right? But I think, my first question back would be like, what is the objective, right? Video can move the needle in many, many ways. So can display. And ultimately, if you can, it doesn't have to be an either or situation. It can be a journey that we create and talk to the automotive shopper because of this larger ticket purchase. We can hit them in various ways and hit them emotionally with video, and then kind of drive them to sale with display later. So I believe there can be a role for both, and native and streaming and audio, and everyone plays a role, but I think it kind of ladders up to the ultimate objective, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it also comes down to, we're talking about the segmenting and kind of really understanding your audience, and sort of the nuances. There's certain segments that, they, just depending on their behavior, they will gravitate more to kind of, sort of the video reach. But again, it's not just one touch point. They are living in multiple realms. And so, we always kind of take the guidance of, I show you, I teach you, I show you again, kind of all those different ways that we can, reveal the product in all these, touch points for the consumer are helpful. So yeah, I would say it's, again, your objective, who exactly are you speaking to, and then understanding their journey. That is a big part of the narrative, because, not everyone's journey is, going to be the same. So there will be different opportunities there depending on where, maybe consumers over-indexing or under-indexing on the journey. And you can adjust your kind of spend accordingly. So you're optimizing.
That's great. Unfortunately, I'm being told that we're out of time. But before I pass it back to ThinkLA, I did want to give a big thank you to our panelists, Nicola and Raul. That was amazing. The ThinkLA team, of course, my Ogury team, and lastly, our audience for joining us today. So I'll hand it over back to ThinkLA.
Thank you so much. That was a great discussion. Big thanks to Simon and Nicola and Raul for sharing your expertise and your insights. Thanks to Ogury for your support, and thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. We'll be sending out a survey later today, and we rely on your feedback to make our events as relevant as possible to you. We'll also be posting a recording of this event on our website and our YouTube channel, as well as a podcast of the audio. Take care and stay safe, and we hope to see you again soon.